She discovered the truth on a quiet evening when the house felt heavier than usual. The signs had always been there, hidden in small inconsistencies she tried to ignore. Bank statements did not match, conversations felt rehearsed, promises lost their weight. What hurt most was not betrayal, but realizing she had been strategically deceived. Her comfort had been financed by silence, and her stability depended on looking away. In that moment, she understood staying would mean slowly disappearing as herself. No argument could justify the price her integrity was being asked to pay. She sat alone, staring at the walls, knowing this decision would change everything. Fear pressed against her chest, but clarity finally drowned the noise of denial. She was no longer choosing between love and loss, but between truth and convenience. She thought about the life she would leave behind if she walked away that night. The home, the routine, the financial safety, all built on compromises she never agreed to. People would say she was foolish for abandoning security in uncertain times. They would never understand the cost of staying where respect had expired. Every object around her suddenly felt borrowed, conditional, and emotionally rented. She realized none of it truly belonged to her, not even the future she imagined. What scared her was not poverty, but becoming someone who tolerated betrayal. She imagined herself years later, successful on paper, but empty inside. That image frightened her more than any unpaid bill or lonely night. The decision stopped being about loss and became about survival of identity. When she finally stood up, her hands were shaking, but her mind was steady. She did not scream, beg, or negotiate for comfort disguised as peace. There was no dramatic confrontation, only a quiet certainty in her voice. She explained she was leaving, not because she hated him, but because she valued herself. The room felt colder as the words settled between them without resistance. He looked confused, certain she would eventually choose safety over dignity. He underestimated how tired she was of shrinking to maintain stability. She grabbed only what fit in a single bag, nothing more, nothing symbolic. Each step toward the door felt like walking away from an entire former identity. Yet, with every step, her breathing slowly began to return to normal. She closed the door behind her without knowing where she would sleep that night. The city lights outside looked unfamiliar, as if she had entered another reality. Her phone buzzed with unanswered questions she was not ready to face. She walked without direction, carrying fear, grief, and relief in equal measure. For the first time in years, the future was completely undefined. There was no plan, no safety net, no guarantee waiting ahead. All she had was the decision she refused to regret, even if it ruined her. She had walked away with nothing except a fragile sense of self-respect. At that moment, she believed she had lost everything that mattered. She did not yet know fate had already taken note of her choice. The first days after leaving blurred together in a quiet, uncomfortable haze. She stayed where she could, never long enough to feel settled or welcomed. Every unfamiliar room reminded her that certainty had been replaced by improvisation. Mornings arrived without structure, without purpose, without anyone asking where she was going. She learned quickly how silence can be louder than confrontation ever was. People she once trusted suddenly became difficult to reach or strangely busy. Messages were read but unanswered, sympathy offered without real help attached. She began to understand how conditional support had always been. Her absence made life easier for everyone who benefited from her silence. That realization cut deeper than the loneliness itself. Money became a daily calculation instead of a background assumption. She counted expenses carefully, avoiding things she once considered insignificant. Simple choices now carried weight, each purchase demanding justification. She watched her savings shrink faster than her confidence could grow. Opportunities she applied for never responded or politely declined her presence. Her experience felt invisible, her value questioned without explanation. Meanwhile, she heard how comfortable life remained where she once lived. Nothing had collapsed in her absence, nothing seemed disrupted. It felt as if her sacrifice had gone completely unnoticed. That thought made her question whether leaving had mattered at all. At night, doubt became her most persistent companion. She replayed conversations, searching for moments she could have endured longer. The comfort she left behind began to romanticize itself in her memory. Fear whispered that pride would eventually cost her everything. She wondered if dignity was a luxury reserved for those with resources. Every failure fed the idea that she had chosen the harder path unnecessarily. Her confidence weakened with each unanswered email and missed opportunity. She stopped sharing her struggles, tired of forced encouragement. Silence felt safer than explaining a decision people never supported. The weight of independence grew heavier with each passing day. Still, beneath the exhaustion, something refused to completely break. Despite regret, she could not imagine walking back through that door. Even in uncertainty, she felt strangely aligned with herself. There was no pretending, no adapting, no shrinking to fit expectations. Pain was present, but it was honest and entirely her own. She learned how resilience forms quietly, without celebration or witnesses. Every difficult day proved she could survive without borrowed security. Though fear remained constant, it no longer controlled her direction. She had paid dearly for her choice, and the bill was still accumulating. Yet somewhere deep inside, she sensed this was only the beginning. Reality stopped being patient once her initial determination faded. The world did not reward courage the way people claimed it would. Every effort she made seemed to end in polite rejection or quiet indifference. Interviews felt rushed, conversations ended early, promises dissolved without explanation. Her resume carried experience, but somehow it no longer carried weight. She began to feel outdated, replaceable, easy to overlook. Each closed door echoed louder than the last, feeding a growing sense of failure. It was no longer about starting over, but about being allowed to begin. Hope slowly transformed into routine disappointment she learned to expect. The belief that effort guaranteed progress quietly collapsed. She watched others advance while she struggled to stay afloat. People who compromised less than she did moved forward without hesitation. Some benefited from shortcuts she refused to take, and it showed. They spoke confidently about success, while she measured days by survival. The contrast felt personal, even when it was not directed at her. She questioned whether integrity was practical or simply naive. Each comparison weakened her resolve and strengthened her self-doubt. The narrative around her choice began to feel embarrassingly idealistic. She wondered if morality only mattered when success followed soon after. Without visible reward, principle started to feel like punishment. Bills arrived without concern for her internal struggle. Late notices replaced encouragement, urgency replacing patience. She sold what she could, quietly letting go of pieces of her past. Objects once tied to identity became temporary solutions to permanent problems. Every sacrifice felt heavier because it was made in isolation. There was no applause for perseverance, no validation for doing the right thing. Only the quiet pressure of responsibility waiting to be met. She learned how quickly independence can feel like abandonment. The freedom she fought for now came with relentless accountability, and accountability showed no mercy. The most painful part was not failing, but feeling forgotten. No one checked in the way they once promised. Her story stopped being interesting once it stopped being dramatic. Struggle without spectacle attracts very little attention. She realized how invisible dignity becomes when it costs too much. The world moved forward while she remained suspended in uncertainty. Each day asked more of her than she felt capable of giving. Exhaustion replaced optimism, and resilience felt dangerously thin. She had walked away believing something meaningful would follow. Instead, it felt like the universe had turned its back on her. There came a night when exhaustion finally overcame pride and resolve. Her body was present, but her spirit felt dangerously distant. The room was quiet, yet her thoughts refused to slow down. Every failed attempt replayed itself without mercy or restraint. She questioned whether endurance was strength or simply delayed surrender. The future no longer felt uncertain, but painfully empty. Survival demanded more than she felt capable of offering. That was the first time the idea of going back felt reasonable. Not as forgiveness, but as a necessary compromise. The thought scared her more than the hardship itself. She imagined reopening doors she had closed with so much conviction, not because the truth had changed, but because hunger ignores principles. Loneliness has a way of reshaping morality when comfort disappears. She convinced herself it would only be temporary, just until stability returned. Dignity suddenly seemed flexible under enough pressure. Her phone rested nearby, heavy with unresolved history. One message could undo months of struggle and self-respect. She stared at the screen, weighing pride against survival. The decision felt cruel, regardless of which path she chose. Both options carried loss, just in different forms. Tears came quietly, without drama or relief. She felt foolish for believing courage alone could protect her. The world had not met her honesty with fairness. It rewarded convenience, not conviction. She wondered if fate even noticed people like her, or if destiny favored those willing to bend without breaking visibly. Her strength, once her anchor, now felt like an unnecessary burden. She questioned whether integrity had any real value without witnesses. The silence offered no answers, only deeper uncertainty. That night, she believed she had reached her limit, but something unexpected happened in that stillness. She did not reach for the phone, not because she felt strong, but because she felt empty. Going back would not restore what was already lost. It would only confirm the lie she escaped from. She realized returning would cost more than staying broken. Even at her weakest, she could not betray herself again. That clarity arrived without comfort, but with finality. She accepted that this path might never reward her, and for the first time, she stopped expecting anything at all. If this story is making you feel the pain, the betrayal, and the injustice behind every choice, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell. Here, every story dives deep into broken trust, hard lessons, and powerful revenge. And you don't want to miss the next fate-changing story. The shift did not arrive with celebration or sudden relief. It appeared quietly, disguised as something too small to notice at first. An ordinary day unfolded with the same uncertainty as the others. She had stopped expecting change, which made her less guarded. That was when a brief interaction altered the rhythm of her routine. A simple conversation, unplanned and insignificant on the surface. No promises were made, no miracles offered, just genuine attention without curiosity about her past. For the first time in a long while, she was seen without explanation. That moment stayed with her longer than she expected. She was offered something modest, almost easy to dismiss. It was not the opportunity she imagined when she first left. There was no prestige attached, no immediate sense of victory. But it came without conditions, without manipulation, without history. The simplicity of it felt unfamiliar and strangely honest. She hesitated, instinctively searching for hidden costs, yet none appeared, only a chance to contribute and learn. Accepting it felt like lowering her expectations even further. Still, something inside urged her not to walk away this time. She said yes, without fully understanding why. That small commitment gave her days a different texture. Routine returned, not as comfort, but as quiet structure. She woke up with direction instead of dread. The work itself was unremarkable, but the environment was respectful. No one asked her to shrink or justify her presence. Her effort was acknowledged without exaggeration or pressure. For the first time, she felt useful without being exploited. Confidence did not rush back, but it stopped retreating. Each completed task rebuilt a piece of her trust in herself. Progress resumed, measured in stability rather than ambition. She did not realize how much had changed until one calm evening. She noticed she had not checked her phone for validation all day. The past felt quieter, less demanding of her attention. She was no longer surviving moment to moment. The fear that once dictated her choices had softened. She began to understand that dignity had not abandoned her. It had simply waited for a place where it could exist freely. What she accepted as small was actually foundational. The universe had not rushed to reward her courage. It had waited until she was ready to receive something real. What started as something small refused to stay small for long. One quiet opportunity led naturally to another without force or persuasion. Someone noticed her consistency and mentioned her name in a casual conversation. That mention opened a door she was never meant to knock on herself. She was invited into spaces she once believed were permanently closed. Not because she demanded entry, but because she had earned quiet trust. Her past struggles were not questioned or dissected. Only her present effort seemed to matter now. For the first time, momentum worked in her favor. It felt unfamiliar, almost suspicious, but undeniably real. She began meeting people who valued clarity over appearances. Conversations felt direct, honest, and free of hidden expectations. Her opinions were not only welcomed, but genuinely considered. She noticed how easily confidence returns when it is no longer defended. Each interaction reinforced the idea that she belonged exactly where she was. The need to explain her past completely disappeared. She was no longer defined by what she walked away from. Instead, she was recognized for what she brought with her. This version of herself felt stronger, calmer, and unmistakably grounded. Growth stopped feeling like resistance and started feeling like alignment. Financial pressure slowly loosened its grip on her daily thoughts. Bills were paid on time without panic or sacrifice. Stability returned, not as luxury, but as dependable peace. She stopped calculating every choice through fear of collapse. The relief was subtle, but deeply restorative. With safety restored, her mind regained space to think creatively. She began setting goals again, cautiously at first. Ambition resurfaced, now tempered by wisdom instead of desperation. She no longer chased validation through survival. Her focus shifted from escape to expansion. The most surprising change was internal rather than visible. She no longer measured success by what she had lost. Regret lost its authority over her self-image. Even memories of the past felt distant, almost irrelevant. She understood that leaving had not delayed her future. It had redirected it towards something more authentic. Every difficult step suddenly made sense in retrospect. The struggle was not punishment, but preparation. Fate had not rushed to prove her right. It had waited until her foundation was strong enough to hold more. She did not notice the victory when it first arrived. There were no announcements, no dramatic turning points to mark the change. Life simply became easier in ways she had stopped believing were possible. Stability settled in quietly, without asking for celebration. Her days were no longer defined by urgency or fear. Work felt meaningful, relationships felt balanced, and respect felt natural. She realized she was no longer surviving on borrowed tolerance. Everything around her existed because she had earned her place there. That realization carried a calm confidence she had never known before. Success no longer felt fragile or conditional. People began to treat her differently without knowing her full story. They trusted her judgment, sought her input, and relied on her consistency. What once required effort to prove now existed without explanation. She was not impressive because she endured hardship. She was impressive because she emerged without bitterness. Her presence carried clarity instead of defensiveness. The strength she gained was quiet but unmistakable. She no longer needed to announce who she was. Her actions spoke clearly on her behalf. Respect followed naturally without demand. At the same time, distant news reached her without emotional charge. The life she left behind was not as stable as it once appeared. Comfort had continued, but meaning had slowly eroded. The person who underestimated her strength now faced emptiness alone. What once felt like injustice began to resemble consequence. She felt no satisfaction in this reversal, only understanding. Fate had not punished anyone on her behalf. It simply allowed truth to unfold without interference. That realization brought peace rather than revenge. Justice, she learned, does not always seek applause. She stood firmly in a life she had built with intention. Nothing she had now required her silence or self-betrayal. She was no longer defined by what she escaped. She was defined by what she chose to become. The absence of resentment surprised her the most. She had healed without needing validation from the past. Everything she gained felt clean, deserved, and sustainable. The world had not corrected itself dramatically. It had simply aligned around her truth. And for the first time, she felt complete. She finally understood what she had carried away that night she left. It was never money, status, or the illusion of certainty she abandoned. What she took with her was something quieter and far more powerful: the ability to live without asking permission to be herself. Everything she built afterward grew from that single difficult choice. Nothing she gained required her to compromise or disappear again. The life she lived now reflected intention rather than tolerance. She no longer wondered if leaving had been a mistake. The question itself had lost relevance over time. Her reality had already answered it. Looking back, the hardship no longer felt cruel or unnecessary. Each struggle had stripped away illusions she once depended on. Loss taught her what was never truly hers to begin with. Fear forced her to develop strength she did not know she possessed. Silence helped her hear her own voice clearly for the first time. Every closed door redirected her towards something more aligned. She saw now that nothing had been delayed or stolen from her. It had all been rearranged in her favor. Fate had not ignored her suffering. It had used it as instruction. She realized how misleading the idea of losing everything truly was. What she left behind was comfort without respect. What she gained was ownership of her own life. Stability returned, but this time it rested on solid ground. Security no longer depended on silence or compliance. Love, when it appeared again, arrived without conditions. She no longer feared abandonment because she trusted herself fully. Her value was no longer negotiable. Nothing external could threaten what was built internally. That understanding changed everything. She walked away with nothing because nothing there belonged to her. Fate brought her everything by waiting for her to choose herself. The reward was not immediate, dramatic, or obvious at first. It arrived slowly, honestly, and without debt. Her story was never about sacrifice alone. It was about alignment, patience, and quiet courage. She did not chase destiny or demand justice. She simply refused to betray herself again. And in doing so, she discovered the truth. Sometimes, fate gives you everything only after you let go of the wrong life. If this story is making you feel the pain, the betrayal, and the injustice behind every choice, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell. Here, every story dives deep into broken trust, hard lessons, and powerful revenge. And you don't want to miss the next fate-changing story.